And at the beginning of everything, they are calling a prince, until our prota realizes that said prince. It's him, so when looking at himself, and those people around him wearing clothes he never saw, he wonders where he is, and remembers that he was in a hurry because he had to finish the plans, because the next day was the day he had to have them ready. But about this you go to talk to him, calling him your highness, and he says that it is already almost time for the execution, telling him to hurry and announce the decree, but he doesn't understand anything that old man is saying, but soon there is a shock that makes him remember everything that's going on, and he makes it known that his self is now the fourth prince of the Grey Castle, Roland Wimbledon. Then he says that the decree fight for the throne was the bizarre idea that his father invented to decide who will be the advisor to the throne, and he placed several territories under the command of his 5 adult sons, and based on performance them to rule for 5 years, he would decide who would become the advisor. Then the father of him says that for 5 years he wants to personally witness the capabilities of governing the lands that were given to him, and he says that the fight to inherit the throne will be a competition. Fair, but then Roland is left wondering if he thinks they are playing a game of strategy in real time, wondering who would guarantee that the initial conditions of all will be the media, and he talks about physical strength, the exaggerated attribute of first prince. Then he also talks about wealth, the main attribute of the second prince, and the military strength that would be the main attribute of the third princess, and then the intelligence, which is the main attribute of the fifth princess, and he is the one who spends his time drinking and practicing indulgence in pleasure, a hedonist. Then he says that this is the fourth prince, who has not been favored since he was little and still loves to play with death, and he was assigned to that border town where even a bird wouldn't want to shit, and he says, who is living next to a bunch of aborigines in that town where excrement is thrown anywhere, which leaves them on the verge of a black death, and says that it really is. Everything is in order, so he is disappointed, and that man next to him tells him that the execution is about to begin, telling him to hurry and announce the decree, and he remember that version of him was there for the reason that he is planning to execute a witch. And while the girl is already on the gallows, everyone continues to curse her, calling her a cursed witch, saying that she is the devil incarnate, and he says that because she had done so many bad things, they must force her to death, and in this the prince is surprised, and says that in a place where civilization is not open-minded, something like this would really be happening, and in this he says that they are putting all the pain and guilt, all in just one miserable person, and in that he orders that witch to be freed, and the man who was next to him is surprised by his decision, as is almost everyone the residents there, and he realizes that any mess he's going to get into isn't going to work, and says he is tired, and they will make the decree another day. But then that gentleman starts asking him to turn back, and the chief knight Carter appears telling him he says this is no joke, and says that once the witch's identity is confirmed, they must be killed, and he says that they must do this because it may attract others witches to free her. But then the prince wonders and becomes curious that a knight who has an arm thicker than a person's body is afraid of an invasion in prison. But then the prince asks if it wouldn't be nice if some other witches came and they captured them all at once, and he says he's going to rest, and everyone they are dismissed, and Carter is surprised by the boy's decision, and already in the border town, in the southern castle, where the prince's temporary residence is located, he locks himself in the room, and is surprised by his situation, wondering what happened, what he did, because the last time he spoke to so many people was actually the year New Chinese, and he wonders if maybe he died from working so hard and has reincarnated in that place there. But he realizes that complaining won't make no sense and let it go, saying that this is still another life. In any case, he can't complain, and says that from that point on he is Roland, and he will start getting information about that witch, so he goes straight to prison. And Carter says that what he is doing is very dangerous, and says that even if she is chained by the amulet of divine retribution, this does not guarantee that the prince will be saved, and he asks the chief knight if he is really scared of a young girl, saying that this is too ridiculous. But Carter says that they are the devil's claws, and the prince wonders why this guy has to be so chatty. And when he arrives in the cell he looks at the girl, and then she gets up and starts looking into his eyes, and he asks her to get closer, but Carter comes in front telling her not to do that. So the prince asks him not to be nervous, and he asks what the name of the witch, but Carter returns to torment her, saying that she is a witch who used witchcraft to kill people in the North Slope mine, and he is a monster who can't even be burned to death. And he tells the prince that he shouldn't talk to her, because she will definitely bewitch you, but he simply beats up your soldier, who doesn't stop talking. So he asks what happened in the northern mine, questioning if she can tell him in detail, but she is a little crestfallen, and he complains about what went, asking if she doesn't want to talk about it, but she says she's actually going to talk, and says that his father works in the mine, but because of the collapse that happened he was trapped. Then she says that at that time the miner wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to steal whatever he had that was valuable. Then a man arrived calling him a damn thief, and fighting the man, but he ended up being defeated, and the girl calls that man of Uncle Ansgar, and as she screams for him, the man who knocked him down says he won't let her. No one can ruin her plans, wanting to kill the man, and the girl becomes desperate seeing that scene until her magical powers begin to surface, and when she comes to, she can only see a body in front of her, completely charred, and then her uncle asks if she was the one who did it, and your wife says that it is the power of a witch. And they start to get scared of the girl saves your life, but the only thing that matters is whether she is a witch or not, and after they come out of there while she is carrying her father, she asks them not to tell anyone that she is a witch, but things didn't go well as they should, and she ends up in prison, and the prince realizes that she is only there because her neighbor gave it to her, and she says he didn't give it to her, the person who gave it to her. It was her own father, so the old man starts saying that as he can see, she already confessed, and he must execute it quickly, but he says that on the contrary, he wants to give a look at the famous witch's power, and then the girl starts asking if he wants to see the power of the brothers that everyone talks about, and he says yes, and she says that they put the medallion of divine retribution around her neck, so she can't release the witch's power, and she questions whether he dares to take the locket of retribution, divine sense of hers, and that's if he's not afraid that his curiosity might end killing her, but in doing so he pulls her by the necklace and ends up breaking it, and asks her show her, telling her to start her performance. Then the girl starts to activate her magic of fire, and he is amazed at what he sees, and the fire takes over the entire cell, surrounding the girl, and Carter asks the prince to be careful, and he wonders if that is the power of a witch, and as he marvels, the cell bars begin melting, and Carter tells the girl not to come near him, calling her a damn witch. And the prince thinks it's no wonder Barov said fire can't kill her. After all, she is fire itself, so how would she be afraid of herself? So the girl simply puts out the fire, and the prince is amazed that magic really exists in that world, and starts to imagine how many resources she could make. Then the girl says that it satisfies his curiosity, and says that he can now kill him, but the prince takes off his clothes and throws them under her, saying that he decided to hire her, and then he starts explaining the second law of thermodynamics: heat can never pass from a larger body cold to a hotter body without interference from the environment, and it is impossible to convert the heat of a single source at work without causing other effects, and the change of a state in equilibrium in another, being spontaneous or irreversible, will always increase entropy. Then he starts explaining in detail and thinks that this world is over with the problem of entropy, and she can create magic out of nothing, and that's much more impressive than is so theorized the invention of the perpetual engine. So Barov begins to ask what the boy said, questioning if he's sure he really wants to hire a witch, as she could make him suffer a calamity as easily as snapping a finger, and he asks if there's a problem with that, and Barov says that his attitude is basically publicly announced that they are going against the church, and they will be watched by the association, which is corporate body, and they will kill him in one fell swoop, and he simply asks them to. Barov brings him a copy of the employment contract immediately, but Barov ends up demonstrating doubt, and Roland asks if he, as his deputy minister, doesn't know what that would be, and he says he wants to formally establish a working relationship with Anna, and beyond. Furthermore, he also asks someone to find a house for the girl, and after a while in the castle he asks Barov if he has already prepared everything he instructed him to do, and he says that according to his instructions, the witch was already killed in Forquim, so public during the afternoon, but then Barov says that he actually saved a witch and the risk is too high, and he thinks the prince is causing too much trouble, but Roland tells him not to doubt his decisions, and says that from his point of view, witches are demons, ghosts, or monsters. So Barov tries to fight back, but the prince says seriously with him, asking if he thinks the border city is a good place, and he says it's not a good place, and the prince says it really is a terrible place, and he says that without the second brother's fortune and the third sister's military strength, what would be the chance that they have to beat them? And Barov stands still listening to this, and the prince says which is practically zero, so he can only resort to one method, and in that Barov is left enchanted by his words, and he says that's it, asking where he is. ordering him to bring her to him to find, and in the meantime the girl will receive a bath. And one of the maids says that the prince wants her to wear that as her uniform. Work, and she wonders if she really has to wear that kind of thing. And right after wearing that thing it is said that Prince Roland wants to see her, and while. So he goes to look at the house that was built for the girl, and he thinks that even though it is built in a hurry, so Anna would have somewhere to practice, that cabin looks pretty decent. Then Carter announces to the prince that Anna has arrived, and then he sees her in that little outfit of the maid he gave to the girl, and he keeps thinking that the outfit decision was indeed correct, as workers' attire is very stiff, and wizards' robes are very embarrassed, and only that maid outfit that has been altered is the most appropriate for witches. And he asks Anna what she thought, if that outfit fits her. However, she completely changes the subject, asking him why he welcomed someone like her, and she says she's a witch, and has evil, corrupt blood running through her body, and asks if he isn't afraid, and in that she remembers everything she went through until therein the prejudice he suffered from people, and the prince says he is not afraid, and he says that thinking that the power of witches originates from demons is nothing more than human prejudice, and he says that the reason people fear her is because besides, if they don't understand you, they just can't understand that kind of power. And he says he doesn't believe that this power is demonic, and he doesn't believe in anything more that that power belongs to her, and only to her, and he says that it will help she helping to control that power, and a while later, in the thesis room, she seems quite tired, and the prince asks if she can still continue, and the girl invokes his magic easily, and he says that practicing fire control is not that easy as imagined, and as the girl continues testing her clothes begin to burn, and the prince thinks that he happily let Tyr prepare a handful of spare clothes and they Anning's insistence will not wearing the maid outfit while practicing seems to have been a bit of a decision. Wise if not the maid's outfits would have all been burned, and then the news arrives that Barov has something to quickly report to him, and at that he begins to look for Your Highness, and he says that the patrol squad reported that they found traces of demonic beasts, and says that the demon months came early this year, but the prince wonders what he's talking about, and Barov says that the prince shouldn't be clear about this, but every year after the first snow has fallen the sun becomes weak and dark and the gates of hell within the mountain would open in the meantime, and he says that the border city just has no capacity to protect itself, so everyone, the inhabitants will have to migrate to the Songsmith Forge. However, he asks the prince, rest assured that his safety will definitely be your priority. Then he asks Barov if he has ever seen the gates of hell before, and he asks how normal people could see it, leaving aside the fact that the mountain it is totally impossible to cross. Just by getting close to it the person would be affected by the evil miasma, but he says there is a method, and the prince becomes curious with this, and he says that the person would not be affected if they were a witch who fell from the grace and have become the devil's guards, and only witches are not affected by the miasma, and consequently they are able to see the gate of hell. Then the prince asks about the demonic beasts, asking if he swears he has seen one of these before, and he says he's never seen a demonic beast before, and he says he just like the prince, it is also his first time in the border city and in the center. From the Grey Castle Kingdom, only a few people have encountered a true demonic beast. And in this the prince says that to have to migrate every year, how could this place manage develop, and he says that at first he thought that even if the border city is just a wasteland, at least it should still have the potential to develop. But apparently, this place is nothing more than a hopeless hole, and he talks that since the strong songbook is able to defend itself against demonic beasts, this means they are not invincible, so he asks why they can't defeat them in the border city, and Barovio says that the strong songbook has a great wall and Duck Ryan's elite troops are stationed there, and he questions how a frontier village is such a small place, it could be compared to them, so Roland realizes that the reason why the village, Frontieria, was built between the north and the Shursway River was to be used as cannon fodder. And he orders Barovio to bring his people and meet the local guards and hunters, and he tells them they need to have lived there for more than 5 years, and they are the best choice to face the demonic beasts. And after that he simply goes to eat with Anna and asks her to tell him about the months of the devil, and she says everything is fine, saying that unlike them nobles, too, the devil's months are a nightmare that they have to go through every year, a nightmare that someone could even die, and like a wise prince, her father is a miner, and like most people in that village, he lived a hard life, and she says that every year, when the devil's months arrived, they would transport the year's collection from the border city to Forte Cancionero, to exchange for food for the next year and some coins. of gold, and she says that during the months of the devil, they would be temporarily established at Forte Cancionero until winter ended, and she says that there was a year in which this period lasted for 4 months, and the fort government official told them that the mineral production that winter there was only enough food for 3 months, they would only give food for the 4th month when the next shipment of ore arrived, but because of the months demons weren't finished yet, they still weren't able to leave the fort songbook, and not only that, but because food and all other necessities were all distributed, the strong abusing the weak was a daily occurrence, and she says that some people were unable to hold out during the demon months and ended up dying. Then he says he recognizes that this must have been hard for a girl like her, so as for her father, and she says that actually during that time her father was still very protective of her, but then the atmosphere changes completely, and she says that these were 25 goals of gold, and his father just wanted to keep living, and the prince slams his fist on the table, talking that these kinds of demon months will never come again, and he guarantees this to her, and he questions where Barov is sending for him, saying he wants to ask how he dealt with the issues he requested, so already in the government office he will speak with Barov asking if those are the people he's looking for. And one of them is the Grey Dog and the other is Brian, and he says that those two are the Border Town's patrol squad, and they are in charge of lighting the beacon every year, and that other hunter said he's fought demonic beasts before, and personally cut off the head of one of these beasts, and the Grey Dog begins to speak with the prince that when the snow started to fall on the lighthouse tower they were able of spotting the movement of the demonic beasts, and they passed through the hidden forest. So they lit the lighthouse fire to notify the townspeople to leave, so the prince says that since they both came together he should let his partner answer, wondering what demonic beasts look like and also questioning whether they can be killed, and he says that they can be killed, and originally they were animals common in the forest, and even though they were affected by the evil miasma and became fierce maniacs, they can still be killed, and he says that every year after the months of if the demon finished the strong songbook, he would send out the cavalry troops to finish it off with the remaining beasts, which would be on the path between the fort and the border village. But then that hunter who was there starts talking, saying that they are nothing special, and tell the prince that he killed demonic beasts before, 2 of them, so everyone is surprised with that, and right after saying that, he looks in front of the prince, and he notices that time really matches the man who said he had killed 2 demonic beasts before. Then Barov says that this is a hunter from the city and his name is Iron Axe. And because he is so tall, it is rumored that he has the bloodline of the giant of the Majin clan. And the prince questions him about having killed demonic beasts, and he says, who killed a species of wild boar and a species of wolf, and the prince questions what he means when he talks about species, and he says that species is the way that hunters classify them, and they were originally common forest animals, but because of from the infernal evil Mayadima, they became crazy, fierce, and very difficult to deal with. Then he remembers saying that the wolf species improves his dexterity, plus their speed becomes impressive, and if you want to kill them, you'll have to prepare a trap before, and for the wild boar species, its black chorus becomes extremely harsh, even at a distance of 50 yards, and it would still be very difficult for the beast to penetrate. And the prince realizes that the strong becomes stronger, and the quick becomes even stronger. Fast, however they are still all animals, and the Iron Axe says that it is exactly that, saying that they are not the scariest enemies, he says that the scariest are the hybrids, and he says that they are the devil incarnate, and only hell would be capable of creating such hideous beasts, and he says he has only seen one hybrid species before. And not only did it have the strong body of a ferocious beast, but it also had a pair of wings on its back and was able to fly for a short distance, and in addition, it appears to be able to know where he is, no matter where he hid, because he always found that he only managed to survive by jumping into the river shortly before passing out, and in that the prince thinks that the world is becoming more and more like a fantasy, a wall strong can stop common beasts, but what about those that can fly, and in this the prince says that hybrids must be rare, and Carter says that there aren't many of them, and every period of the demon's months must have only 2 or 3 hybrids, otherwise the strong songbook would have faced big problems every year, so the prince thinks that's it, and says he decided stay in the border village, but then Carter is just saying that this matter will definitely is out of the question, and he says that against the wild boar species alone, only the elite troops of the songbook fort are able to deal with it, recounting its large numbers, without a great wall as support, depending only on guards to defend against demonic beasts after casualties exceed 10% for sure. everything would fall apart, and then the prince stays calm saying that if this is the case, and if he leads a wall, and he says he's going to build a wall right between the beginning of the mountain, of the hillside and the Red River, but Carter says that even though he likes to play, he should have a limit, and he questions whether the prince knows how long it would take to build a wall. That, not to mention they only have 4 months until the demon months, so he says that even if they were 4 years old, maybe it wouldn't be enough time to build the wall. Then he says he understands that, and says that Carter shouldn't make conclusions hasty, and if you don't have a decent wall when the time comes, they'll just will follow and retreat to the strong songbook. After all, he does not intend to waste his life in that damned place, and so Carter says he swears to protect it with his life, and already in the Grey Castle, in the clear waterport, Garcia says that the sea breeze has become cold, and winter is coming, and she asks Ryan when his fleet of black sails will be able to return, so he says that if nothing unexpected happens, she will be able to reach the clear waterport in 3 days. She says this is the last trip of the year, and hopes that he ruins a very satisfactory surprise, and says that if she keep gold pieces in the closet, they will just be stones, only using the pieces of gold, that they will be able to display their true worth. So she tells. They go back to the room, as the wind is getting stronger and stronger, and already in the palace. He talks to her, saying there's something he doesn't understand, questioning how she got it. Predict all of this even before the king announces the fight for the throne, and she questions what he means predicting, because she didn't know that her father would think about a fight for the throne. And she says this is a disgusting idea to help pave the way for that, his beloved second son, and she questions whether the person who best governs her city would definitely be fit to sit on the throne of the Grey Castle, and she says she thought that he could understand, after he saw the plan of the Black Fleets, and he thinks. Which is why, because its fleet was not just built to gather fortune, allowing withdrawals and not adding taxes, and he says that since the Froda das Black Sails has begun, has already gained experienced sailors, fierce warriors, and the support of the people, and he says that this is the third princess of the Grey Castle, Garciel Imlanden, a woman who is able to count, with her clarity and strength to ascend the throne. And at that she changes the subject, saying that she heard that those little tricks failed. And he says yes, saying he only has news from the border town reporting that the pill failed. As for other places they don't even have any news, so it says that if they don't have news from other places, it means they were killed by her brothers, as expected. However, she did not expect that even her fourth brother was going to make it out alive, and to tell the truth she feels a little disappointed. And Ryan says that the Fisherman King said in a letter that she saw the fourth prince eat the pill with her own eyes, and Garcia says it fails, and she doesn't want to hear anything explanation. And once the demon months begin, your adorable fourth brother will to Fort Cancionero to take refuge, and she says that when the demonic beasts attack, the fort is sure to be in confusion for a while, and he must write the letter to the fisherwoman, telling her to grab this chance. And she also asks if the pill was purchased of the alchemy master Einbills, and questions what he said that time, saying that the pill is colorless, tasteless, and melts immediately on contact with water, and final death if the pill is taken, being incurable, and it is the newest feat of his alchemy. And Brian says yes, that's what he said, and so Garcia orders him to be hanged. And in the past, while Anna is in a pasture, a man comes asking if she is reading again, asking whether they are poetry of the new, or is it the history of religious development, and she greets her teacher, but then everything falls apart, and he wakes up to her being hanged, and becomes desperate, but then he returns to reality, thinking that he dreamed again about the execution of Anna, and thinks that if a pure girl like Anna pisses, she can be proclaimed as evil. Those administrative officers of the Grey Castle, whose greed cannot be undone, it should be the demons of hell, and he says that if it weren't for them, replace stone materials to have a few hundred more gold pieces out of their pockets, would not have caused the collapse of the new theater while it was under construction, and took with him the lives of more than 30 people, and in this he says that they are the ones who should be hanged, but that Rhino didn't give them the trial they deserved. Instead, it was the innocent bricklayers guild that took the blame, imposing high taxes, distributing unequal resources and disorder in public security, and thus crowning with the title of a confused innocent little girl, ending up cruelly hanging her. And in that he asks God what evil really is, and if he is able to see clearly. And so someone knocks on the door, and a little girl goes to talk to the teacher, saying that she feels that there is something wrong with her body, and she asks him if she is going to be hanged like Anna, and he says no, and she will be fine, because her teacher will protect her. And during The day he walks down the street thinking that he didn't impose himself when the Bricklayers Guild was destroyed, and he also did nothing when Anna was hanged, and he can't let. The same thing happens to Nana, and he thinks he should do something, but then he hears someone asking not to be squeezed, and I go and see what all the fuss is about. He notices a job note, which has the symbol of royalty, and remembers His Highness, and says that it is said that his way of thinking is unique, and his personality is different of common people, and precisely he dislikes the church extremely. However, he is more. It is likely that he will be treated as an accomplice of the witches and sent to the gallows, but he thinks that now he can only place his hope in that prince who doesn't like the church, and that he will be able to treat the church's laws with toilet paper, and says that for Anna, who has already died, hope for Nana who is still alive, and also for the hope for the remnants in his heart to stop growing, and a while later Carter asks for the prince, high and wide. He intends to build that wall, and he says that at least 15 feet tall and 6 feet wide, big enough for 4 people to walk together side by side, and Carter says that if it's like that, they'll have to dig a trench as deep as a person's height to stabilize the top of the wall, and furthermore, if the top part is in the measurements he said, the width from the bottom of the wall will have to be twice as much, and he says that even if the excavation of the trench and the construction of the wall begin at the same time, and if he gives you 350 artisans, the most he can guarantee is that he is able to complete in the demon months next year. So Roland asks what the main problem is, and Carter says that the main problem is that to guarantee the stability of the wall, each stone must be chosen and cut appropriately, otherwise it will be very difficult for them to stay together. And the prince says he understands this, saying he will follow his plan. The excavation of the trench and the construction of the wall will be carried out at the same time, and he speaks that as for the construction of the wall, he need not worry about that, as the last product from the Grey Castle's alchemy workshops, the cement, will leave. He is surprised, and already in the cement burning room Carter asks him if in that fourth, such cement can actually be made, and Roland thinks that cement production, it's quite simple and the raw materials are very common. After all, you just choose the outskirts of the border village, he will be able to get everything he needs, and the point crucial to making cement is its temperature. However, it doesn't remember the temperature specific need, and at the time he is there are also no reliable tools to control and configure the temperature that way, and so Anna leaves the cabin. And the prince asks Carter to wait there, so he says that way the production of cement can only depend on the witch's power, and so she looks at him and asks if it happened right, and she says that she didn't disappoint, and when they get in there she asks if it's the thing he wanted, and he says it looks like it, but whether it will work or not, he will only know after testing it, and she asks what that is for, and he says, which is used to build houses, bridges and roads. There are many places where it can be used, and if this is successful in the future, people will no longer need to fear the cold wind or that heavy rain and snow destroy their houses, and he says that the building material so incredible is only possible because of her, and so they leave and Roland demonstrates what cement is capable of, and Carter asks if this is the effect of cement, as it seems that he glued 2 bricks together, and he says it looks very good, and it's very firm, totally different from hardened clay, and so Carter tries to loosen the bricks, but ends up failing miserably, and Roland tells him to stop, tells him not to be so bothered, because he already more or less understood the hardness of cement, and the production this time was very successful. And Carter asks if this is the effect of the cement, and he says that yesterday it was still fluid, like a candle that had just melted, and just after one night he became as hard as stone, and says that with that thing they can build a wall as fast as they can. As long as there is enough stone, they can even build a wall around the kingdom within 5 years, but then Roland asks what's the use of that, and says he doesn't. No matter how high the wall is, it is still not able to defend against the enemies that are inside it, and he says he would prefer to transform the wooden houses in the border village in durable cement houses, and be sure that your people will no longer have to fall into a situation where they don't have a home to return to after a calamity, and he talks that in the future he will let everyone see that witches are the #1 production force. That's a lot of slavery talk, man, I'll tell you. And in this, while some workers do their part, Roland is happy that they publicized the draft note and doubled a number of stone cutters, which allowed them have ample time to prepare the raw materials while Anna rests. He says it's because it's very easy for her to catch a disease while she works a very dirty environment, so he can't let her continue doing these things. And he thinks that in the future, when the production scale becomes even larger, only Anna will not be enough, and he says that witches should not be used as consumable products. They should only be used as an engine that pushes civilization forward, but he thinks that with Anna's power, they were able to solve the problem related to cement. And he says that even though the foundation for the wall connected to the mountainside north and the Red River has already begun to be excavated, building a wall will not is as easy as he imagined, but Carter tells the prince that because he lowered their states and personally show the North Slope workers how to dig the trench during their first day of work, they are working much harder because of the pain, and he says that even though they worked hard, only a crooked trench was dug in the North Slope, and instead of him saying that it is a foundation for a wall, it's more like a long sewer, which he thinks even he and his civil engineer neighbor were called an engineering slave. What they learned is very different. He says that he basically doesn't understand this type of civil engineering problem, and he immediately thinks about asking a professional for help and going there to help him quickly, and in that, Barova appears asking to speak to him and saying that she has something to report, and he questions what happened. Then the old man says that a bricklayer came to respond to the recruitment and proclaimed Pedrero's guild before, so he asks about this guild, saying that if he remembers correctly it is a famous organization, and he says that however, it is said, which they were ordered to scrap for lack of work, and he wonders how a problem may not happen when you work with it, and he says that this is the kind of talent they need now, sending the old man to bring him to meet with the prince. Then already in his office he is looking at Anna while she studies, and then the person he wants to meet arrives, and it is that same priest from before. So Groland asks him to leave the etiquette aside and raise his head, but when he gets up, he sees Anna there, questioning herself. Then both Groland and Carter go crazy, because he recognizes the girl, and she calls him teacher, and Groland has a trick telling Carter to block the door, not letting him escape, so the knight will block his path, and Groland begins to wonder if this isn't too much of a coincidence, because a random bricklayer he recruited is actually the witch's neighbor, and in that, the priest kneels down asking if it's really Anna, apologizing, saying it's great that she is still alive, and Groland thinks that however, from the looks of it, he would not be a mean person against Anna, and maybe he has some secrets, and in that Anna gets messed with it, and Groland asks him not to be nervous, telling him to calm down emotions and answer his questions, asking if he is not a bricklayer, and asking why he became Anna's teacher, and the priest says that he lost his cool, and responds him saying that his name is Carl Van Bart, and he was once a member of the Stonemasons Guild, but now he's just a teacher in the border village. So he says that Anna is a student he taught, and says that although he doesn't know why the prince saved a witch, even if it is to make her a concubine, is better than sending her to the gallows. And the man thinks this at least shows that the prince is not afraid of the rumors about witches being the devil incarnate, and he says that if he is able to convince Your Highness to have Nana as your concubine, perhaps she can escape from being harmed. This guy must be crazy, right? Nana, if you don't remember, is that little girl who was studying with him. And for love God, I hope that doesn't happen. So after explaining Nana's entire situation, he hopes that the prince understands that he hopes that just like Anna, Nana can also hide in her concubine cameras, and says that like Anna, Nana is also a girl. Adorable, and the prince asks if he can bring her to meet him, and says that if she really is a witch, he will ensure that she does not suffer any harm, and says that in the meantime, he can't order someone to take her away from the Pinheiro family, especially when she hasn't suffered with no threat from his family, and he also raises the flag saying that the reason why he saved his Nana is not what he is imagining, but while he says everything seriously in his head, he is totally happy because there is another witch, and he says that this is a very good news, and says that even if she still doesn't understand the power she has, if she is willing to help, that will definitely come in handy in the demon months, and he says that Crook needs her help, and says that compared to meaningless speech with power of witches or the evil power of the devil, he is much more inclined to believe that neither goodness nor evil has anything to do with the power of witches, and he also believes that this power can be controlled, and he says that it doesn't matter if it's Anna or Nana, while they don't do anything against the law, he won't think they committed crimes, and in that, he changes the subject talking about why he was called there, asking if he participated in the construction of the Grey Castle wall, and Carl says yes, so the prince says that he intends to build a wall between the Red River and the beginning of the mountain of Northern Slope, to defend against demonic beast attacks, and he says that from that moment he will be in charge of that project, and then after a while, Nana goes to meet the prince, all daring, and she asks him directly if she is going to die, and he says that she won't die, because Anna is also living there, and he introduces himself to her if in the room the prince rolls from Wimbledon, and when he is to ask the girl's name she says is Nana Pino, and with that she runs to Anna, and the prince looking at the two thinks that Anna is only 17 years old there, and he wonders how pretty she will be when she grows up, so he returns to his normal thoughts and tries to speak with them, saying that he heard from the girl's teacher that she awakened the power of a witch. And she asks again if he is going to have her hanged, and he says of course not. And he says that those who were hanged are all criminals and waves, and she doesn't is a criminal, much less Anna, so he says they don't need to worry about. So, then Nana says she's not sure, because the teacher says that witches gain powers after being seduced by the devil, but she says she has never seen the devil before. Then Anna starts to comfort the girl, and Roland questions when she found out that it was different from the others, and she says it was probably a week ago, and says, who saw a little bird twist its leg and really wanted to help it, and after that she felt something dripping out of his hand, and he asks what happened next, and she starts remembering that she was surrounded by water, and she says that water surrounded the bird. And suddenly, after that his leg was recovered, and with that Roland orders Carter to bring a chicken, and he says that's it, he wants one that is very alive and extremely healthy without any illness, and in this Carter will catch it, and he wonders if it could be that her power is of the healing type, and he says that her power has a very important meaning in people's lives, and he asks the girl why she still thinks witches are evil if her power is capable of healing little animals, and Nana says that the professor said that witches are capable of doing things that ordinary people cannot, and she says that even if it doesn't seem bad, this is a trap that the devil set to seduce more people, and she swears again that she has never really seen the devil before, and Roland says that it is clear that she has never seen the devil, as this is nothing more than a lie from the church. And her teacher is one of the people who was tricked by her, so Nana asks if the church is lying to people, and asks why, then it shakes the head saying that this has nothing to do with preferences, they are doing this solely for benefits, and some time later, a very embarrassing scene is taking place. Double meaning, but what's actually happening is that Carter is holding the chicken that is struggling, and Roland holding something that is scaring the chicken a lot. Tells him to hold her steady, and in that he goes after her, hurting her, so he asks Nana to use her power to cure the chicken, and she says she will try using her magic and recovering her completely, but a few hours later the chicken ends dead, and Roland says that he finally understands Nana's power, and says that she can recover damaged part of the body, yet its power cannot make it a new limb, but if she uses the power on a limb put back in place, she can make the cut heal completely, and he says that however, she has no power to reverse life and death, because after the chicken died, its healing power no longer had any effect. So he tells Carter to return the chicken to the kitchen while Nana continues crying. And she says the prince is terrible, but he says everything is fine, tell her not to cry more, instead she must go eat, so he prepares a table full of sweets for the sweets, and at the end of the afternoon Nana is taken home, and Nana asks him because he didn't let her stay, because like her, the girl is also a witch, and he says that she still has her family, and so far they haven't discovered that she is a witch, but Nana says it's just a matter of time, and he says that's it, it's just a matter of time, but her family doesn't know yet, so they're going to leave the subject like that for now, and in that he asks if Anna misses her father, and she says simply no, and Roland's mouth becomes bitter, but he says that Nana will come there often, in fact, he intends to let her come every day to train power, and asks if, like Nana, Anna also wants to return to the academy to learn with the other children, and he says that while he is there, the day when everyone can living a normal life will come, and he guarantees it to Anna, so on another day, he says that since Calvin Beatty took over the project to build the wall, he was somewhat free, and he says that every afternoon he accompanies the two witches to practice in the flower garden while he has afternoon tea, and he talks about how he occasionally goes to the base of the North Slope mountain to look at the construction progress of the wall, and he says that it is true that in the last 2 weeks progress has been moving forward at an extremely fast pace, but things are still not so good. And Barov complains to him saying that the gas with the recent recruitment of workers, it's really big and that amount of money is being taken out of his pocket, and he says that according to financial calculations they will not be able to withstand only until autumn next year. Then Roland starts to get scared, wondering what will he do since he is so poor. While the prince thinks of a solution, Barov thinks that lately Roland walks completely different, and he says that in the Grey Castle the fourth Prince Roland did what he wanted without any fear, and his bad reputation for not having a nobleman is known to everyone, and he says that if the king didn't promise him that he would go appointed as official finance minister, he would actually have left and not worked more, and as soon as he arrived at the village of Fronteriaca, the prince had offended every possible noble. Not to mention fighting for the throne, he had no desire to rule the city border. The administrative positions were all filled by the few civilians he brought from the castle. Gray, and he says that ever since Roland saved that witch, the prince seems like a person completely different. In the meantime, he is thinking that building the village Fronteriaca, depending only on his money, is not enough, but the income from that place is very miserable, and he says that mortgaging all the years or for the post songbook to exchange ration villages for the demon months, this kind of equivalent exchange is basically a monopoly, and he says that the other sources of income come mainly of age, small properties such as taverns, weaving and blacksmithing houses, then in relation to the amount needed to build the wall, is nothing more than a drop in the ocean, so he says that they should start thinking about a way to increase the income of the village of Fronteriaca. But in this Barov asks if he was possessed by a demon, and he says that this is not the case. Is right, because in any case demonic powers would be dispersed in front of the amulet of divine redivision, then it is impossible that he was possessed by a demon. But he still remains very suspicious. Meanwhile, a red-haired man arrives at the pier from the city of Fronteriaca saying that the place is still in precarious condition. And the man who was with him says that the last time he came there must have been a year ago, calling him ambassador, and says that this poor city has nothing but Pedros. And the ambassador says that it was a year and a half ago, and he says that the duke chose a person different to come to each season, and the last time he went there, the village of Fronteriaca, it was still summer, and besides, leaving aside the rocks, that place has all the high-quality skin types. Then man asks what he is talking about. However, the redhead doesn't even care, and he says that the most important thing is that he has a huge amount fort outpost, if they assume responsibility for a defensive line, the vast expanse of land that is there would be integrated into the fort. But the man who was with the ambassador starts to ask, because the courtyard is empty, asking where are the oars they should have prepared, because they said they would go that day, but the ambassador says that they must first go to the castle to see the prince. Then the man who accompanies him asks what they should do, asking if it could be that the village of Fronteriaca has a new exchange partner, questioning whether they sold the oars to Villa do Salguero, or perhaps to the mountain range of the Fallen Dragon, and he supposes that this must be that prince's idea. Selfish idiot. But then the ambassador tells him to stop. Even then the boy tells him, look to one side, saying that it is a boat from Villa do Salguero. And the ambassador, do you think that if the prince has already contacted those cities that are at the bottom of the river Red, he will have one less chip to bargain with, so he says that if he negotiates with the monopoly plan, the negotiation will definitely not work, nor if they arrive at the castle. The ambassador wonders what kind of person is in the room? Prince is, so he is greeted with a feast for two, and is left wondering which would be those little wooden sticks that are being used to eat. So he looks at the prince using Raxi and tries to copy, but he obviously can't, stalling to talk to him, asking what he thought, saying that compared to normal cutlery, that pair of wooden sticks are much easier to obtain, and after straw for your people, they will no longer have to worry about diseases entering through their mouths for using their hands to eat their food. So the ambassador thinks that room prince is really inexplicable, and so after their food they go for dessert. The ambassador speaks to the prince, saying that according to past customs, that it should be the day that the border town delivers the ores, and he didn't see any mineral in the backyard that is in the sink. Then the prince says that unfortunately a landslide happened on the north slope of the mine last month, so your people have been trying to resume production, but he says that, however, the debris in the area of the collapse does not have been cleaned completely, and according to the current pace, he is afraid that the resumption of mine work will be delayed until next year. So the ambassador asks while he chooses to have the last 2 months, and he says it wasn't very good, and according with convention, those pieces of stone are not enough to feed your personal, and he talks to the ambassador saying that he must remember the 2 months of the devil 2 years ago, when people were dying of hunger and cold, and he says that if they follow the same trading method as before that year, he will be able to maintain wheat only for 2 months, and if that is the case, your people will not be able to survive that winter. Then he says that past trading methods must be abolished once and for all. But then the ambassador says that he deeply regrets this issue, and says that that tragedy will definitely not happen again, and says that he will ask for the 6 noble families to lend together enough ration for an entire month. And his people can pay him back slowly after they have recovered in the next year, but then Roland says that if he sells the minerals to the town of Willow, he won't have to pay anything back slowly, and he says the town of Willow has made up its mind. Use gold to buy the stones, and also at the same time they want to sell them wheat, yogurt, bread and honey at market price, and he says that anything that can be bought with gold they sell, so compared to the method of exchanging item for item from the fortress songbook, Willow Town's method is much more reasonable, but he says that before even deciding on this, he asks his ambassador, even though he is willing loan enough ration for a month, he would have all the necessary authority to make the other families decide too, and he says that looking at the family emblem of him, he must be someone from the Madre Silva family, and he says that as one of the 6 families, how he could convince Duke Ryan and the other families to come to the agreement, and asks if he is capable of making the final decision, and then the ambassador is kind of left behind, and remembers when he spoke to his father, saying that the new feudal lord of the city of Fronteriza, the 4th prince, will definitely not be willing to exchange minerals and jewels for bread and wheat, and he tells his father that if he buys their things for 30% less market price, they will still be making a profit, but then the man asks if his son is talking about that pig prince, and questions where he would have this capacity to deal with commercial matters in the city of Fronteriza, ordering him not to speak any more about this matter. And he says that the affairs of the city of Fronteriza will not change because of the arrival of that garbage. And then he realizes that his father couldn't be more wrong, and he says that in fact just his father alone would be difficult to convince, but he must still try, and thinks about selling it to him for 30% less, and then he tells Roland that they will use the price 30% below the market price to sell the city's minerals and jewelry. Fronteriza, and the offer he is making must be higher than the price offered through the town of Willow, and he says he will return to the Song Fortress the next day. And after reaching an agreement with the other families, he will bring a new agreement to him. And he tells the prince saying that the Song Fortress is a much better option for him and his people, since the town of Willow is very far away, and although it is possible to go there, ask for refuge during the months of the devil, the journey there would still not be easy. But then Roland asks what he means by nothing easy, and he says something dangerous situation can happen, but this subconscious begins to wonder if it has just threatened the prince, but then Roland starts laughing, saying that he seems to have confused something. And he says that he has no intention of seeking refuge in the city of Willow, but he also says that has no intention of going to the Song Fortress, and he's not going anywhere. But then the ambassador asks what he is talking about, and he says that during that winter he will stay there in the border town, and this town will soon become the border of the Grey Castle Kingdom, and he speaks. We can even take you to have a look at the new wall that is at the northern base of the mountain. And the ambassador is curious about what he is talking about, and Roland says that it is exactly a wall. 20 feet high and 4 feet wide, it is connected between the north coast and the Shursui River. And he says that with this wall they will be able to defeat the demonic beasts of the border city, and then the river remembers all the nobles talking about the wall city, and says he thought it was a joke spread among the nobles, and didn't think the prince would actually build a wall, and ask how he did it. A wall of that scale could not be built in less than a few years, and he also wonders where the border town took away all this manpower, and as a result he begins to look at the prince with different eyes, and says, who will remember everything he said, and when he comes back he will immediately argue with the 6 people, and also says that he wants to take a look at that wall, and the prince says that in that era, there's nothing like life as a doctor, and if people didn't make babies at this time, most of them would probably sleep relatively earlier, and Roland says that the prince like him has rights. Special things, like leaving one of his maids and escorting him to bed, but he is very kind. So he doesn't do it, but then he starts to hear a strange noise in his room. You ask who that is, and a woman is in your bed, and she says she didn't expect the ambassador of the strong songbook would return his legs like that with the rabbi, and he says it looks like that the prince had some tricks up his sleeve, so he wonders if she is murders him and tries to run, but then the woman has a knife on the wall, telling him please don't be impulsive, and says that he only sees him to talk to him, and he, looking at the knife, wonders if that's a way to make a person stay and talk, so he questions who she is, and she says she doesn't have a name, but her sisters call her Rakanal, and she says she would first like to express her gratitude to him, and she says that she is very grateful for his affection and tolerance to the Conjewitch all this time, and he wonders why she would be grateful, but then, to the Pazanti who is with her, he remembers when Barav was talking to him, saying that the pattern on that coin is known as the Eye of the Sacred Mountain, and it is said to be an emblem of the Cooperative Association of Witches, and he has to pay more attention to that, saying that they are not someone he wants to tease, so he wonders if she is a witch, and she realizes that Roland is a very informed person, and he questions whether the reason she went there is because of Anna, and he says that he still doesn't know where he got so much information to go there at that moment, because it's already very late, and says that if he really wants to leave there with her, he should have been dead a long time ago, and she says she knows that, because if he really had having done that, she wouldn't just want to talk to him, and she says that the Cooperative Association of Witches do not like to interfere in matters of the profane world, so it would be controversial to kill one prince only because of a witch, but she is still able to give him a souvenir. Deep and unforgettable, and he tells her not to worry, because she is living well, and he says that he knows that besides Anna, there is another little girl called Nana who is also there, and says that he arrived at that place a week ago and had not met him face to face until now. And she says that she saw everything he did with her own eyes, and he realized that she arrived a week ago and saw everything he did. He started to get scared, asking if she was following him all this time, and he wasn't aware, and he tries to change the subject, saying that I wanted to have a conversation with him, and he said it couldn't be just to thank him. But Roxaneo gives a cut, asking him if he's not tired of standing there all the time, and tell him to come closer so they can talk properly, and tell him that your appearance is not ugly, so it won't scare him. If he doesn't fall, I'll fall easily. Little girl. So after asking him to bed, he starts to think that it looks like she really has no more intentions, so he goes to listen to what she has to say, and he says she can start talking, and she says that as expected he is not scared of her, and says that he is different of the other people she has met. After all, he hates them because he is afraid of them, and she says that she can see fear in their eyes, but he's just curious, so he starts to think that the atmosphere can't change so quickly, and says that until now she was still a killer, but how did she transform that arrogant person, and says that the reason for her visit was to tell him that she is going to take Nana there and not away, but then he gets up shouting saying that she's not going to do it, and says that they have a good life there and no one can hurt them, and he also asks where she thinks she will take the girls, as there is no place as safe as that one. And she says she intends to take them to the Witches Cooperative Association, which is where they should be, and says that the members of the association are their allies, and they will no longer have to disguise themselves. But he says that they don't even have a fixed home, and says that last month his soldier discovered association camp in the hidden forest, and the footprints showed that they were heading towards but there is nothing more than big mountains in the north, and she says that what he says is right, and the association is currently somewhere in the mountains, and for witches that is the place safer than there is, but he gets very upset, asking if she wants to take the girls to spend the winter in the mountains as if in the wild, questioning where this means security, and asks if you have clean water to drink, or even if you have enough food, a warm shelter to stay in. And yet the demon months are coming soon, but what would they be thinking? But he remembers what Barovia said before, and he says that the purpose of the Cooperative Association of Witches is to gather as many witches as possible to go towards the sacred mountain together. And he says it's because witches can only obtain true peace towards the mountain sacred, and he asks her what she intends to do by going to the sacred mountain. But then she tries to deflect the question by saying that she can't talk about that subject, so he says that he certainly doesn't agree with that, because in 2 months the entire world out there will be full of demonic beasts, and says that even the mountains will not be able to free themselves but then he has an idea saying that they can go to the sacred mountain whenever they want, because they think of going to the border city to spend the winter, and in this Roshanon becomes completely surprised, and he says that they wouldn't be late to go to the mountain to put of winter, and the only thing that shocks Roshanon is that he wanted the association to move there, saying that he is an interesting person, but she says that even the prince not being afraid of them, his associates are, and he says something else here, saying that since if they were revealed, the church servants would go looking for them immediately. But he keeps thinking that once they get through the demon months, peacefully, of the witches' lives, her people will realize that witches are no longer, but then she begins saying something else, saying that there is a reason why she wants to take the girls away, saying that Annie is almost maturing, and he questions what that could be, and Roshanon responds with another. He asks, wondering if he knows why witches are seen as the devil incarnate. Then she says that the awakening of most witches happens in the months of the devil. That's when rumors say the gates of hell open and normally ripen. For a witch it is the dividing line. A woman who has not awakened for 18 years has no the possibility of becoming a real witch, and she says that after maturing, a witch will suffer from the devil's torture, devouring her body during the devil's months. Every year, and the pain felt is unimaginable. It's as if something wants to break your body and out of it, and an increasing pain can be felt in every vein. And she says that if a witch can handle all this, she can recover, resting for 4 to 5 days, but for witches who can't take all that, they die in the midst of this torture, and their death is a thing too horrible to be seen. And this is one of the reasons why witches are seen as the incarnations of the devil, and she speaks that with this kind of miserable death, and with the rumors spread around the church saying that that's what happens to people who believe in the devil. Over time, they were titled as the incarnations of the devil. Then he asks what happens after mature, and she says that after maturing, a witch's powers become stable, and then of the stabilization of power it will increase substantially, and it may even be that they develop a new field of magic. And he says that in the old man's book it is written that witches can only reach eternal peace on the sacred mountain, and will no longer have to suffer the torture of the devil in their bodies. And he asks if this is really true, and she says no one knows sure, because the sacred mountain only appears in legends. But even so, if it takes the girls to the association camp, the chance of survival is much greater. And she says that the witch does not need to hide and can live freely. Somehow the strength of torture of their bodies is alleviated. Then he begins to think, saying that despite his plans require the help of Anna and Nana, letting them suffer would create a great risk for his plan. And he agrees, saying that everything is fine, saying that Anna is downstairs and will call her to come there, and if she accepts she can take her to the association, while Nana, you won't be able to see the girl until tomorrow, so she thanks you for understanding, saying that she played evil. But a while later she is screaming, telling Anna that she is not lying, and saying that she can feel a magician on her, saying that her body is almost mature, and saying that her maturation will be in the months of the devil that starts in the next 2 months, and say that the sooner she goes to the camp, the safer she will be. So Anna asks the prince if he remembers that he once asked her if she would like to hook up with Nana and go back to her teacher at her school, Carl, to learn along with the other children. And she says that she didn't respond to him, and says that what he says about living like a normal person or something, she doesn't care about those things. She says the only thing she wants is to be by the prince's side, and that's all. And she says that the devil's life will not be able to kill her, and she claims that she will resist this. So Rukanal, she says she understands, and the prince asks if she will leave empty-handed, and she says no, we'll stay there. And she says she thinks that beginners who don't experience maturity won't understand how dangerous he is. So Rolode asks if she will monitor him winter all over again, but she doesn't even respond, getting close to Anna, and says that she's already very close to the death several times, and saw several of her friends die with her own eyes. And anyway, when that day comes, she will at least be able to give the girl some help. And if she can't handle all of this, she says she has experience of what happens after that also. And she says that in both cases she will come and visit him. When it happened, he disappears right away in front of him. So Rolode asks if this is Rukanal's power, realizing that the ability of sound cancellation, noting that she was basically born a killer. And he talks to Anna, saying that it's not dawn yet, and that she should go back to her room and sleep some more. And at that she smiles, calling him a fool. Wow, a pleasant climax is forming. And with that, Rolode will talk to his people, saying that the reason he brought everyone together there at that moment is because he had important news to tell everyone. And he says that 4 days ago the ambassador from Forte Cancionero arrived there, and he went there to exchange the ores. But like all of them, you know, last month they had a terrible accident. A landslide happened in the cave of the North Slope, and since then production has not been able to resume, so everyone is worried. And Rolode says he spoke to the ambassador about his situation and hoped he would reserve enough food for them, and so they would pay off the debt next winter. But he says that the ambassador rejected it and had no room for negotiation, just like 2 years ago. Remember, 2 years ago everyone is scared, and he says that 2 years ago, because of the food shortage, they lost 20% of total production. And he says that some people lost their brothers and others lost their children. But then he asks them again, asking how much they are prepared to lose again, and then everyone starts asking him to save them. And he says that he will not leave his people, not even the only person, that he says that according to the price normal market, 2 months of overproduction can be exchanged for half a year of food. But Fort Cancionero never traded honestly with them, so everyone starts saying that they are ashamed and they betrayed them all this time. And he says that this way he sold ores to the merchants of the city Willow and exchanged for some food boats, which is enough for them to survive the whole winter, and they all manage to stay well fed. And he says that this is great, but he says that because of this his relationship with Forte Cancionero is damaged, so they will have to spend the winter there in the border town, and he knows that. Some people are worried about their ability to face demonic beasts when they attack, and most people have seen that a firm and stable wall is being destroyed on the west side of the city, and he says he wants to tell them that the demonic beasts are not stronger than wild creatures that are inside the forest, and he says that they are not able to climb the walls or even move stones with their mouths, and even if they have a hard skin and thick flesh, they are a bunch of easy targets. And he talks to his people asking if they are determined to hide in the warehouses of Longsong Fortress and starve to death. How cowardly, or are they determined to protect their king and his children and protect the city border until the last moment under your command? And he promises them there now that as long as they defend the city until the end of the demon's months, everyone who fights on the wall will receive 25 real silvers as payment. Then he says that for anyone who suffers misfortune and lose their life, their families will receive 5 real gold as compensation. So everyone starts getting excited. He says that they are determined to fight for the prince and swear that they will protect the border city until their death. Then at night in the fort they start laughing, talking that Prince Pingendo wants to leave them aside and do everything on his own, and one of them says that the prince doesn't even have bricklayers, that he's just relying on stacking stones that he doesn't. We're disturbed and talks about putting wet mud between them, and says he fears the walls will collapse on its own when it reaches a certain height, and they keep mocking. But the leader, one of them, asks what Petrovi thinks, and he says that he originally wanted to maintain the monopoly, but how much before they get the ore at 30% below price they will make a profitable negotiation. But he says that even so, the prince does not intend to sell the minerals just to the strong songsmith. He is intending to sell the ores for 50% of the price below the market, which means that he intends to drastically increase ore production next year, and that way they can earn much more than they did last year. And Petrovi says that he still intends manufacture iron tools and sell by himself, and no matter where the iron tools are growing products on the market. But he says that these are not the main points, and the leader asks what the point would be. He says that if he manages to defend the border city, it will be definitely good news for the songbook strong, as they won't have to spend the money he gives at the demonic price every year. And he says that even so, the fight for throne will only last 5 years, and after that they can get a much bigger border town, prosperous, and at that moment the strong songbook will become one of the 3 largest kingdoms in the territory. And he says that his advice is the strong songbook should send people to help the prince to build the wall and also help defend the border city, and in this the leader, he says that he is right, but he says that if he thinks like a merchant he is only able to see advantages and disadvantages. He tells himself this border town is thriving or not, it really doesn't matter. What matters is this territory is yours and no one can get their hands on it. And he says that there is no exception, not even for a prince. Meanwhile Carter goes to the prince asking if what he said has extraordinary strength, and he says that it is, and says that thanks to Diana's skill those iron plates could be welded without even using nothing to seal them. That he says that the steam engine is something that brought the matrix force that was necessary for the first industrial revolution, and says that even though it seems rudimentary it exudes an incomparable beauty of technology and art, and he begins to praise the simplicity of it, that he is the first mechanic he is. But then Carter asks if he is sure that that pile of metal is not an evil cult ceremony machine, so he just smiles. 5 minutes later he has water boiling, and Carter wonders if it's really a furnace. Meanwhile Anna is throwing fire until she realizes something is wrong and starts to watch all the gears turning and notice that this is what the prince said about the forces hidden in nature, and Carter thinks the prince said this thing could replace the force animal and animal strength, and he realizes that he has that strength that not even 10 horses could achieve. To put up with that, he says that training a qualified rider takes 15 years, but to do those machines only took 3 days. He says she doesn't need to be fed or feeling cold or hungry, is also not affected by arrows, swords and spears, and says that it is only there in the battering ram in front of him would be able to have a voracious weapon on the battlefield. And he realizes that with that machine there would be no reason for there to be traditional knights, so he starts to get sad while the prince is also happy, and says that with this steam engine his cultivation plan again takes a step into a new era. So already in the castle heading to his room, he gets another scare, and Roxanal says that it seems that rumors can't be trusted, so he notices that she's there again and asks if she couldn't give him a little privacy, him asking her if she thinks she is her home to come and go as she pleases. And she says that it is said that the 4th prince is ignorant and incompetent and has a personality vile, but in fact compared to the cutting master he is not inferior in any aspect. And she asks if that drawing on that paper is a blueprint for the iron furnace, but then he is in doubt, asking how she managed to get that secret plant that was locked. in his desk drawer and she asks if he calls it a steam engine and he says yes, saying that this really is a plant but without Ani's help it would just be another drawing on paper and rocks and all. Asks what it can do and he says it can do several things. It can move ores, drain water, melt iron and forge, and it is very useful when massive force is needed. Then he smiles saying that he will keep it because his association has people who can control it. But he says he didn't agree with that. She says of course she won't take that and she won't give him nothing in return. He hands him a secret letter that was delivered by a carrier pigeon that she intercepted, and then he picks it up and starts reading it, and she says that the sender appears to be an employee to Tiri and says that the air in him is not stable at all because in the letter she says that she cannot commit the same failure, further that she will eliminate him during the chaos of the demon month. So he remembers Tiri saying that he really had an employee with that name, and if he remembers well, the old Roland loved to eat her tofu, but Nightingale says that he still had a question from that letter, and it seems that it was one of his brothers who questions what he intends. Ask if he wants her help to calm down the things. He says he'll have to bother her and if possible he wanted her to help him find the person behind that letter. And in this his letter orders saying that he will take that plant as a reward. Then later, he's at his desk when Carter comes up to him saying that his maid Tiri died yesterday. He asks what happened and Carter says she fell from her bedroom balcony and there was no harm type of fight, and the guard also didn't see any stranger entering or leaving the room, so he says that she may have fallen to her death because she was careless and this was certainly an accident. And Roland simply says it's a shame and tells him to leave the funeral arrangements to the chief maid, and when Carter leaves he asks what she got from Tiri and she says who didn't achieve anything because she killed herself when he saw it, and he is surprised, wondering if she didn't dominate her because she thought she had experience with this type of thing, and she says who tied the girl up but didn't expect that she would hide poison between her teeth and that she wouldn't. I could try to measure a little bit and use it. Then she says she could only fake an accident so that it looked like she fell to her death, and says that even then she couldn't hear nothing directly from her, which means she was left empty-handed, but she says she found something in her room that looked like a letter from his family, and says that the letter places Tiri with a sister older. Unfortunately the letter just has normal nonsense, but on the opposite side it tells about the maritime scene in which she was, and she says that as far as she knows two of his brothers are not able to see the sea from his location, and she wonders if the person behind it is his third sister who is in Porto de Agua Azul, and he says that this is probably the case. Tiri's family in her hands as a hostage, and he says that she treated Tiri like a chess piece whose goal was to murder him, and she says that at least the way Tiri killed herself without even thinking before she was placed next to the prince she was trained for at least 2 or 3 years, and he thinks that as expected the race for the throne will not end easy like that, and says that even if he doesn't fight for the throne, it doesn't mean he'll stay prey to the move, so he says that his subordinates will have no doubts about the throne, and he thinks that similar things will happen in the future, and the original says that there is someone there and says he will leave before she arrives, and he is very surprised that she can do that even at night. And then Barov arrives saying that the people he was with looking to fight during the months of the devil have already responded to his recruitment, and he says that after they went after them, people were filtered and are waiting for him downstairs of the wall, so he gets excited to go see them, and Barov says he'll take him but asks if really intends to use those people against the 3 earthquakes, and when he gets there he realizes that Barov's concerns were not unfounded because there are only thin and weak people there, and he asks to Carter if those are the people who responded to the draft, and he says yes, because those were the people who were filtered according to their requests, and they are not criminals, are over 18 years old and under 40 years old, and he says their bodies are not injured severely, and he bagged each one of them himself, and the prince became desperate saying that he was that's okay because he can't have very high expectations at the beginning, and seeing that the production of heroes it was very low, ordinary people had nothing to eat and no clothes so they could warm them up, so obviously they couldn't have a strong physique, and he says that a troop made only by ordinary people, especially in this era, it is a very creative thing to do. But he starts to get motivated, and Barov talks to him saying that even though it's just beginning he should take a good look at those who ask which of them can even use a sword or a blade, in speech that recommends hiring professional mercenaries to protect the wall, and saying that these people can be used to do other jobs instead of protecting that wall. So Carter says that he's not saying he's going to use them. He says that a troop full of vitality has to originate from the people themselves. It doesn't matter if they are feudal troops, troops from a not so distant or modern troops have all proven this rule countless times, so Carter says that he should start teaching them. They wield a sword tomorrow. He asks why use a sword, and he says that if they give him information they will start running. He says one more thing, They must call that Iron Axe hunter over there and they will all look first at what. Do so at noon he brings them all together again and Carter asks what he is doing and says that if you are going to sponsor warriors, your family has several methods to complete the training. And asks why the prince will use that ineffective method. He says that the training is just stay in that position all afternoon and just for doing that they will get an extra egg during lunch and he says that eggs are very expensive. He knows that very well and asks what kind of training method is this, telling them to look at them because he only has food in his eyes, but Roland says that he just has to observe carefully and remember everything because the next days of training they are the same as today, but he says there are of course some small changes, but he will write them down. Everything has to be done on paper, and in this he says that in the age of bladed weapons a shipment of qualified warriors cannot be trained in 2 or 3 months. He says that in addition. Besides, he doesn't need those Spartan warriors. Who can get rid of those beasts? Just wearing underwear, so he says that individual combat and the strength of a troop don't need be exceptional, but they all have to be well disciplined and continue without exciting each order given to them, but he thinks that even so to do this he will have to bring to the end of the training exercises at the military academy, and he says that in just half a month the military training exercise was able to unite students who came from different cities and countries into a unit, and he says that no matter what the means were, the advance. It's obvious. He starts looking at a boy who is shaking while standing up, and he thinks that when people fully understand what discipline is, it will be easier for him implement the next plan. And in the late afternoon it's lunchtime and Carter says that everyone they have ovoista as a reward. They are happy, but then Carter starts banging the pot, ordering, and says that the prince ordered them all to form a row of 4 lines and go orderly receive the cutlery and lunch, and he says that anyone who messes up the order will have to go to the end of the line and will be the last person to get the food, and he says that those who, if they cause problems, they will be taken away by the guards, and hearing all that they form an Indian daughter quickly, and Carter thinks the prince is exaggerating as he is even teaching rules at them, but while he is thinking everyone starts talking about the iron axe and the prince passes by with him, and he says that everyone will have a rest period after lunch and they will enter the camp where the soldiers are, and he says that that person with the iron axe will be their captain and says that he will be teaching them all how to prepare a tent later, and they are surprised by the iron axe is working for 4 princes now. They begin to have a slight prejudice, so Carter asks if the prince is really going to nominate someone of the Sand Nation as captain, and he says that he is not someone belonging to the Grey Castle, and another thing, he is not a person from his continent. He says that witches don't belong to the continent either, Grey Castle, but they belong to the border city, and other than that they have Carter to stay all over the place, and he tries to keep talking to the prince, but he says that the border city doesn't care about a person's past life as long as they haven't committed any crimes against the laws of the kingdom. They are still his people, and in this he simply changes the subject by speaking who just wrote the training regulations, and he says that instead of worrying about people from the Sand Nation, he thinks he should worry more about that there, and says that even so he has some points that he has to worry about remembering. He says that every day at noon they have to take everyone to run around the city until the sun sets, and they all have to do, and if no one gives up he should add an extra egg to their next meal. So Carter says who can understand all that, but he asks why after dinner everyone must go to the Professor Call's academy undergo culture training, and Carter asks if the prince plans teach them to read and write, and says that these are completely useless things to learn to fight against demonic beasts, so the prince can't take that talk anymore, and asks who said that because a troop that is prepared to fight has to be a short troop, and he says that this is something that history has already taught them. And guys, I really like this story. The prince is still being very down to earth. The prince is using a lot of the wisdom he has. He is taking it from the other world and really looks like someone reincarnated. No nonsense and no forget everything he experienced in his past life. He is implementing everything he learned. So if you want the continuation, this should at least be about 24 1-hour videos. Leave like, subscribe, I'll keep bringing it to you, and I'll see you in the next video. Let's go like this at home. I went.